the same time. But anyways, I'd like to just kind of walk you guys through a little bit of our news, our presentation, so you guys can keep up with what's been going on. As I mentioned, I'm glad that you guys have power, and made it out here today. Hopefully you guys have water, and I'm glad that you can now not boil it anymore as of today, hopefully. But it was a rough week that just definitely exposed how unique we are here in Texas, and how our grid is very independent and needs a lot more solar and storage and renewables, and just to help us support ourselves for tough winters that might come and tough summers in which we all have our AC cranked up. So I'll share my screen with you guys just to show a little bit. Let's see. Hopefully you guys can see this. But welcome to the new members and to the old timers and new faces. Great to see everyone here. My name is Juan, and I'm one of the board members here, joined by the rest of my team. And then the latest addition was TJ. She joined us last month as a board member. She comes from a litigation background as an environmental attorney with a lot of solar companies. And of course, we're joined by Beryl, who is our only paid employee at the moment. So Solar Austin is for those of you guys that don't know, we're almost 10 years old, and we are founded as a chapter of the Texas Solar Energy Society. I guess my slide's a little bit out of place, but I'll share with you guys this one really quickly, that we were part of their annual meeting earlier in January, where all the different chapters, from Houston, San Antonio, North Texas, we get together just to discuss what is going on with each region, what are some of our practices, what are some of the things that we can be doing together. So definitely feel free to reach out if there are any questions. I think Kenneth attended a little bit of it, as well as Kaiba, and you can go to the texas.org events site to see the recorded meeting. Some cool things is just how we can also continue to expand the Pathways program craft into other areas of Texas. So going back a little bit, these are our initiatives, right? As Solar Austin, we want to just spread the axis of solar and the education of it across Central Texas. So we focus on the policy advocacy of things, the events and outreach, which such as this one and other happy hours and other tours. Solar education as to how we can help, whether they're adults or kids, understand solar technologies, how to get solar, all those different things, the questions that pop up, as a solar enthusiast, you might get them often, or you might have them yourself, right? So we want to pull all the different resources out there so that we can make it digestible for you, as well as the Pathways program, which I'll let Beryl speak a little bit more about a little bit later, and pushing again with our community installations as to how we can get donated solar systems in community centers, right? So this will be, it's a work in progress, but definitely as we're a small team that's very pragmatic. But I'll let Beryl kind of speak a little bit more about the pathways to clean energy careers, since we just wrapped up the second cohort and our previous happy hour celebration of that.
Thank you so much, Ron. So the Pathways to Clean Energy Careers was launched a little over a year ago, and we are very proud to be moving forward with our third cohort this spring semester. The Pathways to Clean Energy Careers has always been, the goal has always been to facilitate career pathways, avenues for women students and students of color to be able to enter this industry, to be able to engage with it in a more meaningful way. We actually have one of our spring interns currently tuned in at the moment, Telvin, and Telvin, it was actually his first day with his internship today. I'm actually going to give him a moment to introduce himself to y'all. Telvin, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hey, everybody. My name is Telvin Haynes. I go to Baylor University. I'm graduating this May of 2021. My major is environmental science, but I hope to continue my education in graduate school for civil engineering, and hopefully be able to major in material engineering. I'm doing my internship with Solar United Neighbors, helping with the solar co-ops and so forth. Today was my first day onboarding and stuff. I'm really passionate about solar power, green energy. I want our future to not look like the idealistic factories and people and anarchy that comes with climate change. I'd rather it look green and look like, you know, we're a capable species, I guess, that's able to harness the power of our solar system rather than destroy ourselves using it. So nice to meet you all.
Love that. We love a purpose.
Yeah.
Totally could not agree with you more. And for folks who would like to engage with the program, we're actually currently looking for more mentors for students this semester. And we're also starting to do some summer recruitment. So if anyone is looking to host an intern this summer or mentor a student this spring, please reach out to us. Feel free to ping me or just email us at info@solaraustin.org. Juan, I'll let you take it away from here.
Cool. Yeah, so that's a kind of parallel to the Pathways, is the mentorship program where we help tie other people, whether they're in the industry and want to, you know, explore a different part, or whether they're students and didn't get an internship, you know, just so they can have somebody who they can speak to about. So definitely send us a note if you know of anyone or want to participate. Definitely always looking for, you know, greater connectivity between our sector. So a little bit about our news. So we're lucky that one of our board members, David Brearley, is a great author. He used to be a writer for PV. I forgot the name actually, but before PV Magazine. But speaking of PV Magazine, he just got a guest post published, you know, called "The Texas Blackout is a Man-Made Disaster of Epic Proportions." So I definitely recommend that you guys read it. Provides a really good history as to how this disaster that we went through last week was one that had already happened multiple times before. And what the response was from the government, as well as what the response was from the people. But why this is also fuel for us to have these conversations and think about these solutions and think about how we can also just be better prepared for next winter, next summer. So that also brings me a little bit to the second pair of news that I'm sharing here, the second post. Is that this Thursday, the House of Representatives will be having a hearing so that people can express a little bit about what went wrong, what happened. So the utilities will be listening, ERCOT will be listening, our lawmakers will be listening. So I dropped a note for these articles here, but I think that Bear will also share in the chat. There's some speaking points that the KILOWATT organization, Public Citizen, have prepared, as well as an online portal where you can access and just kind of drop off a couple things about your thoughts. And that way we can have a little bit of greater input into our decisions. Also, some big news is that this past month, we announced that we're currently hiring for an executive director. So we're really excited that we've reached this point in our fundraising, that we reached this point in our growth, that we also need a little bit of help, you know, kind of pushing down this mission of expanding the access of solar and the education of it through our different initiatives. So check out the website. You know, we're definitely looking into applications, as well as any sort of nominations of community members that you know that could perhaps help us out, you know, leading a great nonprofit as ours. But we wouldn't be here without these sponsors, right? So FTC Solar has been a major player for us, helping us with the internships, helping us with some grant money as well. And then these are a little bit of our newer sponsors, including Downtown Austin Alliance, right? So them along with Yada Energy, which is a manufacturer here, and Hoshin Blackwell are kind of like the latest to join our group. But we're joined also by Freedom Solar, which is one of the biggest installers here in town, Mayfield, which is where David works, and that's kind of a design firm, and Recurrent, which is a major utility scale developer. Some of the kilowatt level, you know, that C Prime, which is a marketing and media company led by Jason. Then there's also PowerFin Partners and Brand. They are developers and engineers. And then they might be monkeys, which unfortunately just help. Well, fortunately, actually, they help take care of trees just in different ways, you know. So they're definitely one of our friends here. As well as Piper Maddox. Piper Maddox is one of the just career recruiters focused on clean energy specifically. So if you're in need of a job or looking to hire, feel free to contact them. SunPro, Lighthouse, and CD, they're definitely in the space. And of course, the HEB that we all know and love. And then our WATT sponsors, a little bit about Greenbelt is that they're an installer here in town. Clean Power Marketing has hosted a couple of our interns. They do a lot of marketing pieces and really good posts. And then the Deere Group and Greener by Designers, some design firms, and Harris Energy Solutions, which was able to fundraise a few $100s this past month for us. So kudos to them because we welcome all those sort of donations. And if you know or would like to be a sponsor, definitely please reach out, you know, whether scan the QR code, send a note, donate through the Eventbrite. We really appreciate that. I think that we notice these sort of changes and it helps us kind of expand our goal of greater participation here. So without further ado, though, you know, I think that this is TreeFolks' time. We're going to be joined today by Collin and Ina and Margot to speak a little bit about what it is that they're doing here for so long. And then you'll also have the chance to win a Texas walnut, right? So they'll be giving away 3 different walnuts. If you just answer a few questions, right? You can just put the first one to answer them in the chat will be the one to win it. And afterwards you can send us an email or we'll connect with you so that we can get that tree over to you with minimal contact. So I'll let Collin take it away and then Margot and the rest of the team. So thanks everyone.
Thank you very much, Juan. All right, let's see. Share screen. Yeah. All righty. Well, thank you everybody for coming. So this is my presentation on TreeFolks, the local solution to climate change. And I am Collin McMichael, the education coordinator here at TreeFolks. I'm going to be joined by Margot Piper, our development director, and then later on by Andreina Alexatos, our director of reforestation. She'll be here to answer some of your questions if you have any about our carbon program. So just to let y'all know what we'll be talking about today, Margot's going to kick us off with a little bit of TreeFolks history. Then I'll be talking about the Austin Carbon Pilot Program, which is how our carbon program started. Just a little bit on the carbon project's benefits and co-benefits, and then into our bigger Travis County floodplain reforestation program. We'll conclude that with the future of urban greening in Texas, and then Margot will close us out with how to get involved with TreeFolks during a pandemic. And you'll see up here, you have 3 chances to win a black walnut sapling. So there will be quiz questions during this. They aren't too hard. There is one that involves math, and I'm sorry about that, but yeah. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Margot.
You're done.
Talk about some TreeFolks history.
Yay. Hi, everybody. So I'm Margot Piper, Development Director for TreeFolks, and you're really honored and grateful to be here tonight with you guys. And I know it's been a long time coming. Thanks for being so flexible with us. I mean, that's the name of the game, especially after last week, is flexibility. So speaking of flexible, I'm going to try to not talk too much. I am the chatty Cathy amongst our entire group. And so I will say, okay, next slide, please, to Collin. Get me through. Yeah, so TreeFolks has been around over 30 years here in Austin, and it has its origin story is so aligned with everything else that you would think about Austin. It was a group of friends that were having a bonfire during winter solstice. And they said, you know, what's something we can do personally that would impact, you know, the environment? And they decided, let's all plant a tree over the holidays and we'll get back together and just like talk about our experience. So fast forward to their next solstice, who knows when it was, probably the summer solstice. And they each shared how impactful and meaningful it felt to them to just contribute to Austin in that way. And planting a new tree. And so they were like, heck, we can't keep this to ourselves. Let's share the love and wealth. So they started reaching out to neighborhoods, and, you know, they did medians, and they're like, there's so much space in Austin that needs trees. And they started getting sponsors. And so fast forward to park projects. Actually, I think that's the next slide. But, you know, they just found any opportunity they could. They partnered with the city, and they are still involved with TreeFolks, very much so on the back end. So when we have those bonfires, we bring them back. We don't make them use the shovels anymore unless they want to. But what they did was they gathered a great group of Austinites who have continued to give back over 30 years now. So yeah, next slide to you, please, my friend Collin. Yeah, so you see that there are planting projects throughout parks of Austin. In fact, when I was 7 years old, I planted trees with TreeFolks. I was probably one of those little kids in one of the last pictures. We planted some peach trees along Town Lake or Ladybird Lake. And we still go down there. My dad calls it Margot's tree. I'm sure it's not the same peach tree anymore, but you could tell a kid anything and they'll gravitate towards it. So really part of it was expanding and involving citizens and just getting more trees in the ground. I mean, that is a huge part of our mission, but the other portion is empowering and educating the community, because, you know, we all know you can't just plant a garden and walk away from it. You have to have that deep-rooted knowledge. Haha, deep-rooted. Y'all, it happens even without trying, these puns. So beyond the park projects and tree adoption events, the tree IDs, so that's is all tying in the education component. And next slide, please, Collin. So we were a little, not little ragtag, but for us, we doubled in size overnight, essentially. When the Bastrop fires hit in 2011, we were the first on the scene because we were the closest with the tree knowledge, and that's what I've been told. TreeFolks literally doubled in size overnight and activated to go start reforesting that region. And I believe Ina's probably gonna roll her eyes at me. I know she's on here now. Was it over 2 million pine trees? Collin, do you know? Something like, wow, more than I can count on my hands and numbers. How many?
2.2 million, I think.
2.2 million trees. And there are really special components about that. And I don't know if we're covering it in this specific talk, but it was just talk about being the right place, the right time, but also with the right expertise. And that sort of spiraled out then when the Blanco floods hit in Hays County. It was like, hey, TreeFolks, guess what? Let's do the Blanco River. And so also, I know Ina was a part of that as well. So hopefully she'll be able to jump in at some point, maybe in the question and answer portion. But it literally made us front and center from like, hey, let's distribute trees, that we've had this cool partnership with the city, into like, y'all are large scale reforestation now. And we were happy to do it, and grateful, of course, because it takes volunteers and an actual community. You know, it doesn't just take a village to raise a kid. It takes a village to keep an urban jungle going. So yeah, I'm going to walk through some of these other things a little bit later, but you can see here that we have so many areas of education and really just trying to incorporate it into people's everyday lives, because we're also impacted by trees, especially in a green city like Austin. And so, yeah, there are so many opportunities, and we're continuing to work on those. And I will regroup on that later when we come back to how to get involved with TreeFolks. Collin, what am I missing? I'm trying not to take up all your time.
I think you're good. Yeah. That actually takes me to my part. So, and now we're going to talk about the TreeFolks Carbon Pilot Program. So Margot mentioned that when we were reforesting the Blanco River, that really kind of catapulted TreeFolks front and center in the public eye, started doing a lot, and people started to notice. So the way this whole thing came about is in 2007, the Austin City Council said that the city of Austin needed to have carbon neutral city operations by 2020, and then carbon neutral community operations by 2050. So to do that, they kind of started to cut out as much of their emissions as possible. So Austin tried to cut out all of I believe they went to completely renewables for electricity for their municipal stuff. And then they really couldn't get rid of the vehicular emissions. So they couldn't find a way around that. So it's kind of ending up at about 50,000 tons of CO2 a year from vehicles. And you can see over here, it's about 12.5 million tons when it comes to community emissions. So that's quite a lot that needs to be offset. So Austin was needing to find 50,000 carbon credits to kind of offset this very large carbon footprint that they had. And 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide is equal to 1 carbon credit, but 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide is actually a lot of carbon dioxide. So that's about as much carbon dioxide as a 2-story house at 1 atmosphere pressure. It's also the same weight as a walrus, a rhinoceros, a loggerhead sea turtle, and a bison. It's also the same weight as a 50-foot tall pine tree. So not all of that weight is carbon dioxide that's been taken from the atmosphere. About half of the weight of a tree is water, and then like 90% of what's left is gonna be the carbon taken from the atmosphere. So here's your first quiz. So the first correct answer entered into the chat wins. How many bull walruses would it take to equal the weight of CO2 produced by municipal actions of the city of Austin? Let's see, I can't actually see the chat because my thing's open. So hopefully someone has answered. It looks like a few are coming in.
So we have Chris Summers coming in with 50, Ryan coming in, and Blake coming in with 1, Madeline with 13, and Jess with 150.
It's 50,000 walruses. So that's more than 1/3 of all walruses. That's a lot of walruses. And that brings us to the Austin carbon pilot. So they had all of these walruses that they had to use to offset their carbon, and they couldn't get any. So they needed a local source for carbon credits. And the reason they really wanted a local source is because most carbon credit, they come from far away. They come from industrial rehabilitation projects or really large scale rural plantings that are out far afield. So they wanted the projects to be close so that all the benefits were close as well. We already mentioned that we had built the institutional capacity at TreeFolks to kind of take on a project like this. And also City Forest Credits, a really awesome nonprofit up in Seattle, Washington, came out with a what they called their Urban Carbon Credit Protocol. So this was a planting project protocol that was created using scientific methods that actually had real conservative estimates for how much carbon you could sequester from the atmosphere. So when all those pieces kind of came together, we were able to come up with the carbon pilot program with the City of Austin. So it was the Office of Sustainability with City of Austin, City Forest Credits, and TreeFolks working together to do this. We did it through the TreeFolks programs of Ready, Set, Plant, which is our in-town reforestation work. So that's on watershed protection land. We bring in saplings, we have community members come out and we all plant them in the ground. It's a lot of fun. And then there's also community tree planting. So we did a few what we call container tree plantings. That's the difference from the smaller sapling plantings. So this is a few trees that are larger when they go in. So we did a few park plantings like that, and then I think 2 or 3 of these like stream side plantings. And we even got a little bit of KXAN news there. It was pretty cool. So that was success. It was great, but it was success on a small scale. So you really only get about a little bit less than 2 credits per acre over 25 years. So because we've legally protected these trees, we get these credits forwarded to us on a little advance, but it takes 25 years to get all of that carbon out of the atmosphere. Austin needed significantly more carbon credits than we could really produce through in-town riparian planting. There's just not enough land that Austin owns in town for us to plant on in that way. And so when we were realizing all of this, finishing up the pilot project, that's when the Nature Conservancy Accelerator grant came out. And they were asking for people to put in proposals for scalable carbon capture technologies. And so that's how the Travis County Floodplain Reforestation Program was born. Our plan for this was to be a first of its kind program that was aggregating small privately owned parcels across Central Texas and then reforesting around 50,000 acres annually. And this program is growing, so it's great. So now it's actually the Central Texas Floodplain Reforestation Program because we're actually expanding in our range too, which is super awesome. So unfortunately, this still will not meet Austin's credit needs. As we already mentioned, they need 50,000 every year, and that's a lot. But what it does kind of meet a little bit of it. So it helps, and then it really brings the benefits, the co-benefits to tree planting to Austin residents. And that brings me to my next topic, the carbon project's benefits and co-benefits. So this is doing so much more than just sequestering carbon. So I mentioned that if you look at a tree, about 50% of the weight of the tree is going to be water. So it's actually 55% of the weight of the tree is dry mass. 50% of that is going to be elemental carbon, and 42% of that is going to be elemental oxygen. And obviously CO2 is made up of oxygen and carbon. So if you want to figure out how much CO2 is being stored by a tree, you need the dry weight of the tree. So that's the weight of the tree times 55%. And then you multiply that by what we call a carbon coefficient, which is 3.67, and that gives you how much CO2 is stored. The math that goes into our carbon credit calculations is way more complicated than this. There's these parametric growth equations that these really, really smart guys came up with that describe how a tree grows in urban conditions. It's awesome. But suffice to say, this is a quick and easy way to figure out how much CO2 is stored. So all of that CO2 comes from the atmosphere. So all carbon in a tree is from the atmosphere. No carbon comes from the ground. So about 7% of the tree's mass then comes from water that it's broken in the photosynthesis process. So it splits it into H and O, and that gets combined into sugars. And about 1% comes from the soil. So that's going to be the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And all of this makes trees the most effective carbon sequestration technology we have to date. So yeah, trees are awesome. They suck in a lot of CO2. Unfortunately though, remember how I said that a 50-foot pine tree weighs about 1 metric ton? Well, Texas trees don't get to about 50 feet tall, especially not 50-foot pine trees. We just don't have those here. Our trees are really short. So here is our most common conifer on your page. That is an ash juniper. They get to maybe 30 feet if they're really, really, really happy, but most of them are not that tall. So riparian trees in Texas are going to be your tallest trees. That's just because of how much water is available and how much resources are there. Droughts are super common in Texas, so trees near waterways also have better survivorship. So these are 2 reasons why we do all of this in floodplains as opposed to like upland plantings. And now sequestration really takes a lot of time. So I mentioned the 25 years. With our carbon plus credits, this actually legally protects our trees for 25 years from any harvest. After the 25 years, we don't really encourage people to go in and harvest them. They actually have the option to re-up their agreement for another 40 years, I believe. But then there's, if they are harvested, it's not actually the end of the world. There's a lot of stuff showing that once trees get harvested and used as lumber, that carbon doesn't really return to the atmosphere. But besides carbon sequestration, there's also a lot that trees do for us too. And these are quantifiable. So the reason TreeFolks produces carbon plus credits as opposed to carbon credits is because we take all of this into account. So City Forest Credits is special. They figured out a way to put dollar amounts on how much runoff reduction trees provide, how much air pollution reductions trees provide, and cost abatement trees provide. It's really, really neat. So the runoff reduction pretty much comes from the fact that trees have a lot of surface area. So A tree will catch a lot of rain. It can store all that rain on its leaves, on its trunk, and on its twigs. And it also slows that rain. So once it's stored too much rain, it starts to drip off the tree, and that then goes to the soil. The slowing the rain down before it hits the soil really helps the soil, really helps the water infiltrate the soil. The tree's roots also help with that as well. Also with air pollution, the tree's leaves actually absorb a lot of pollutants, and then the surface area takes into account, is important too, because more surface area means more dry deposition of atmospheric pollutants. And then the heating and cooling cost abatement, we mostly see the cooling cost abatement here. That comes from if you shade your AC unit, if your house gets some shade, that really helps with your cooling costs in the summer. In northern areas, or maybe if you get a lot of really strong northerly winds in the winter, if you plant evergreen trees north of your house, it can actually slow that wind and prevent heat stripping from your house in the winter. Also, when you plant enough trees in an area, you actually get regional cooling effects. So recently a study came out that showed that on a block scale in a city, you actually see 10-degree differences if you hit a 40% canopy coverage threshold. So that means any areas that are less than 40% canopy coverage are generally 10 degrees hotter than areas with more trees. And that's on a block scale. So if your neighbor's block has maybe more trees than yours, they could be cooler in the summers than you are. But trees do more than what we can actually quantify with dollar amounts. So there's a lot of other stuff that trees do. These are all considered co-benefits as well. Wildlife value and habitat from trees is super important. We have a ton of trees in Central Texas that have lots of cavities in them. I like to walk by these trees in my neighborhood that bluebirds live in. It's super neat. Those are called habitat trees. They're very, very important. Also, trees produce lots of products that animals eat. You also have noise pollution abatement from trees. I personally witnessed in my backyard, you can hear all the highways in the winter when all the trees drop their leaves. So leaves on trees actually stop a lot of that sound from traveling around. You can also have sightline reduction. Trees are great screens. They prevent you from seeing unsightly neighbors, stuff like that. They also increase human well-being, which is, kind of hard to measure, but people generally feel better around trees. It turns out trees have textural cues to the brain. Just looking at the color green can actually increase the amount of serotonin that's present in your brain. And this actually translates to reduced health costs in areas that have higher canopy coverage. And unfortunately, in Austin, that translates to the Western, more wealthy side. So TreeFolks is very interested in trying to kind of like even out the canopy coverage in the city and make a more equitable area. So we also see reduced ADHD, reduced strokes, reduced asthma, reduced stress in areas with more trees, and increased sense of place. And that's really important, especially it comes from people planting trees. They feel more invested in their community and in the area that they live. And something that a lot of people don't think of, if you plant trees next to a road, the vertical stuff going by you actually slows drivers down. So there's been a few studies now that show that tree-lined streets tend to have slower drivers than treeless streets.
Hey, Collin, as far as the equity type of benefits of the trees, where do you see forest gardens coming into play with urban gardening, as well as developing that sense of place for those communities that don't really have the tree coverage and are looking to build that out?
Yeah, so we do work a lot with communities like that. It's important to go into the communities to work with them and not just come with trees as the solution for all of this. Because you can run into things like green gentrification, where if you plant too many trees in an area, it can increase property values and actually drive people out that you were trying to, help live there. It's a very nuanced question, especially here in Austin. There's a lack of green space in a lot of areas, so you don't really have the ability to add more trees. Yeah, I don't really.
I'll add that a lot of times these communities, they sometimes tell us that they don't want trees because they are a maintenance cost, money that they don't have. So I think trees like urban orchards and things of that sort are probably more likely in areas like that, because the tree also gives you fruit, and yeah, you have to put some work into it. But shade trees are a lot harder to convince folks to plant and care for.
Thank you, Anna.
And I would say one more thing in addition to that is that's why TreeFolks works really hard to find sponsors to come in and help infiltrate that cost, so it's not such a huge barrier. So if there were to be a new urban orchard, you know, it's not just bearing weight on the neighborhood, but having, you know, a partnership, so it spreads that cost out. Three-pronged approach.
All right, and that brings us to our next quiz. This is the one that involves math, and I'm sorry. So approximately how many pounds of carbon would a live tree weighing 2,000 pounds contain?
We have Ryan with 1,800, Andrea with around 3,000, Sarah with 20, Lindsay with 4,037, Madeline with 20,000. They're coming in fast. Juan with 1,000, Carol with 1,100, and Lisa with 1,000.
Oh no, I don't know if anyone got it. It's 550 pounds. So you multiply it to find the dry weight of the tree, and then you multiply that by 0.5 to find how much carbon. Remember, we're saying elemental carbon, not CO2. That one was too tricky.
Chris actually got the closest. Chris was
with Chris?
407.
There you go. Yeah,
Yay.
You didn't go over.
What I love
Price
is that
is right. Oh, damn it.
the engineers that I know guessed a larger number than what the tree actually weighs. Yeah, so it's good they're thinking big.
I wish trees were that good at sequestering carbon, but they're not. All right, so this actually brings us to the Travis County Floodplain Reforestation Program. So this is what developed out of that Climate Accelerator grant from the Nature Conservancy. So we had a lot of partners on this. This was a very large grant, and it aggregated private land parcels. So that was a first of its kind thing. And it protected floodplain trees from harvest, which was super important because it restored creeks and improved stream quality that came into Austin. So the city of Austin was very interested in us doing this. Travis County was very interested in us doing this. Of course, we partnered with City Forest Credits to do this, and the Nature Conservancy and the Doris Duke Foundation were the ones that provided that. So obviously, most land in Texas is private. There's not like huge tracts of public land here. And that actually makes it pretty difficult to do big planting projects. So traditional carbon planting projects are done on really large contiguous tracts of rural land. That's not how we did it at all. Instead, we used semi-urban or urban land, and each TreeFolks planting was done on a very small acreage plot, and a few of them were contiguous, but generally had different landowners. And these were a lot closer to town than most carbon plantings ever get. And this was important because it really changed land use types. So many Travis County floodplains are currently pastures, farmlands, or maintained as a mowed area. And that's not really a healthy way for a floodplain to be. So a healthy riparian area would actually have a heavily vegetated buffer. And in Central Texas, that should be a forest mainly of ash, elm, and pecans. It's definitely not a mowed strip that has really short grass. If it's mowed, the buffer doesn't really have the option to like prevent stuff from getting into the creek. It doesn't filter any of that stuff out. So restoring streamside buffers really improves that stream quality. It lowers the stream temperature, which then increases the amount of oxygen. That lowers the bacterial loads. You actually start seeing fish coming back. So down here, we have an example of a mowed stream, and that's what a lot of our streams look like. After just 1 year of growth, you can see that the buffer really, it comes back dramatically. And then in 5 to 10 years, you actually have trees that have showed up. So when TreeFolks comes in and plants really heavily in here, we actually speed that up really fast. And that brings me to the future of urban greening in Texas. So this is pretty much how I'm wrapping up here. Just want to say that development has really been eating into our riparian buffers and forested lands here in Central Texas. And unfortunately, that means we lose a lot of our big trees first. Big trees tend to have the most benefits. And I know some people talked about Margaret Hoffman a little bit in the beginning. She is the woman responsible for most of our tree preservation ordinances here in Austin. And the reason we have all of those is because the big trees are just worth so much more. But TreeFolks is really trying to turn the tide on deforestation here in Central Texas. We're trying to expand our riparian buffers. We're trying to make Austin a green city. So the reason we're doing this is for tree co-benefits. They make everything so much better. And trees act as green infrastructure for our city. So they catch the water, they prevent flooding, they make it cleaner, they make it less noisy. Trees really make city living much more bearable.
Hey, Collin, I have a question for you. So I think that there's so many great values of trees that sometimes that value doesn't translate to dollars very easily, right? So yeah, when we're looking at these two pictures here, right, it's clear that like there was some development that was made, but like very good areas of trees that were even preserved, it's like half the plot or so. How do you guys quickly just assess like the dollar amount of a tree? And it's a very hard question, but it's like when we have the case of, hey, this land will be worth this much because of the house that will be built on it, meaning, but our argument can be made, this land is worth a lot more because of these trees that have been here for a while and been longer.
Yeah, and that's a really good question. A lot of people don't know that there's actually a pretty easy way to do this. So it used to be that you had to go through all this really crazy math to figure that out. But now we have some really awesome tools that have been recently created for us to actually figure that out pretty easily. So iTree is an online tool that you can use to figure that out. You can calculate either how much a single tree is creating benefits like runoff reductions and stuff like that, or you can calculate how a forested area is creating benefits. And it's all through like visual sampling through aerial photography. It uses Google Earth and stuff like that. And then there's other online tools. If you want to shoot me an email, I'll happily send a bunch your way. But there's a plethora of stuff out there to figure out how much trees are worth and how much trees are actually paying you back every year.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. It just reminds me of a little story. My friend Madeline was also in the call. I'm gonna put you on the spot, but she has this little forest that is outside of like her
yes.
You know, and so she was really passionate about her little forest and really sad that they like kind of created this whole development plan around it. I don't know how the story ended though, but I know that
the story is still in work. So I could get more information on exactly the size, but there's a very dense forest across the street from me, and it's currently zoned. It was trying to get zoned for vertical family homes, which got denied, but it's still on the table to be single family homes. And I really, really, really hope it does not become single family homes. And if there were a way to use this Google map, like what you just said, to understand all the value, because the trees are really quite big. And I know that there's this 19-inch diameter protection type thing. But I just, you know, I'm hoping there's ways that I can talk to you guys to learn how to make sure that the value is really maintained.
So for sure, please reach out to me. I would love to help you out with this. I have tons of tools to help you with this. So just to give you for example, the La Loma and like Hogpen neighborhoods in East Austin, they recently got the city to turn a tract of land near them into, it's earmarked to be a preserve now based on their actions around stuff like this. So what really helps is tree mapping, which we don't really have a tree mapping program anymore, but we have tools that you can use to help. And then figuring out where those really big protected size class trees are is really, really helpful. So the 19-inch diameter trees that you mentioned, those are protected, but then 24-inch trees are heritage. So that's even more protected. There's like a whole bunch of stuff that you can't do to heritage trees.
Awesome. And so you say that that's iTree?
iTree is like the main one that people use for figuring out like benefits of trees.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. And let's see, so that brings us to Margot's next section, getting involved with tree folks during a pandemic.
Oh, yeah, that has been the other name of the game. Talk about flexibility, y'all. TreeFolks is normally 100% beyond like the handful of us that are full-time employees. We run with volunteerism. It's the only way that we could plant all of these, well, almost 3 million trees now. So, of course, this year, because of what it is or what it has been, and we're getting better every day, but yeah, we've had to completely revamp everything that we're doing, from, you know, small tree ID walks that we would normally, you know, have those. I mean, Collin, throughout the entire tree planting season, which by the way, starts in October and goes through the month of 3, what is that? January, March. Yeah, that little chunk of time, that's when all the trees have to get in the ground, and that's getting narrower and narrower as we're seeing climate change happen as well. But normally during that span of time, Collin doesn't have weekends. Collin is out and about giving tree ID walks. Ina's out there planting trees like crazy. Andrew, who's on this call too, he is out there talking with communities, and I'm running around to all of them as well. And you know, they got, good thing I have a mask to keep me quiet. Okay, next slide, please, Collin. So here's some opportunities that we've just been trying to do our best, because we know it's so important to have everybody engaged and stay involved. So for some of our volunteers who've been around for a long time, we have like this higher echelon of training where they become super volunteers, and they help guide volunteer events. And that's all the way from planting larger trees in parks to helping with the Ready Set Plant riparian zone plantings with the city. So honestly, anybody can qualify for that. There's a handful of things that you have to do, and I know we're probably revamping that as well, but normally it would be somebody who volunteers a lot with TreeFolks and they say, I want to do more, get me more involved. And then they get a cool vest and maybe a whistle. Just kidding. I think I made the whistle part up. But also the urban forest stewards, which means you get to spend way more time with Collin than I do. And I'm going to be really jealous until I sign up to do it. But this is our adult education program. And really, Collin, I mean, is it like, you don't have to fully be an adult. You like, what is it, 18 and up? Can like,
actually, yeah. We take high school students, yeah.
Yeah, high school and up. And I mean, this obviously I need to take it because my background is not trees, it's people, but I would love to mix the two. So yeah, the urban forest students, and that is year round, right, Collin? Is that still?
So this year's online, so it is year round. Usually it's done during planting season.
Yes. Oh, yes. And yeah, think that's one of the cool silver linings, though, of having to go online is now, even if you're not part of that program, you can get a lot of the resources through our YouTube channel and at least start, you know, learning a little bit more. That's what I need to do with all this downtime, right? Yeah, and Catherine Beesno, she has a UFS graduate. And yeah, and Catherine, who is on Solar Austin's board, is now on TreeFolks board. So shout out, Catherine. Thank you for that. And we also, I mean, like any group, we are always trying to generate new content on social media. So we are doing tree ID walks that you can, you know, Facebook Live, Instagram Live, tree care workshops and things like that. But also, if y'all have cool tree photos of like your favorite trees, send it to Collin and we can put it on TreeFolks' pages as well, because again, we don't want just to be TreeFolks all the time. It's really about the community. All right, next slide, please, my friend. All right, and so these are winding down now, but we have sapling days, and normally that's a really cool way for us to get trees out in neighborhoods that aren't necessarily considered Austin proper or Austin Energy customers. And so there's sapling trees, which I have learned take root a lot better than a 5-gallon tree, right, Collin?
Yeah.
Learning things. And so we do sapling tree giveaways, or now we call them adoption days because we want you to invest into it. And so we do an events like this. I know you guys are going to win some of these trees. I think the next question might be one that everybody's going to root for. Maybe we'll take the first 3 right answers for the next one. Neighborhoods is also currently going on. So that's our longest running program. It is a partnership with the city of Austin. And that's those 5-gallon trees y'all are probably aware of, where we would normally be in front of HEB or the library, and you would sign up online and you know, say your top 3 trees that you want. And well, this year it's curbside. So I believe, I don't know if they've closed this one, but this is the larger trees and we are literally delivering them door to door. It is bonkers, but it's working really well. So check out that program online. And I know we still have a handful of trees to give away. And again, that all ends in March. And then of course, joining urban forest stewards and getting to spend more time with Collin, you lucky ducks. And then reforestation services. Normally we would have teams going out to help plant, but we just wrapped that up, right, Ina? That ended maybe today, maybe yesterday. 33,000 trees this season, I believe, in Eastern Travis County. Good job, Ina. I bet you're exhausted. Collin, do I have another one?
Yes, you have one more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is my realm. Okay, so you can always donate to TreeFolks. We have a very small overhead because we are actually housed on a City of Austin property. And so we are able to put almost the full dollar, 90 cents of every dollar goes right back into trees. It's really, really awesome. And of course, that gets spread out to all of our programs. Also join a committee. I see a plug here for education committee, which I think everybody here would definitely qualify for. And everybody here also knows way more about trees than I do. So join Collin's team. If you feel like you know more about marketing or infrastructure or things like that, we have a ton of committees like that. You don't have to be a board member. We just want input and excitement. So you don't have to be smiling excited, just excited to partake. Yeah, also just voicing your opinion that you want to keep Austin green, and that we all it's a city that we know and love, and just keeping it fresh and vibrant. And then introducing us to your friends. If you know somebody who would just really, really fit the bill of joining TreeFolks, also we're hiring too. Just keep your eye on us on all the social media platforms. And again, you can email Collin or me or Ina or Andrew. Sorry, Andrew, I know your inbox is probably kind of full. But yeah, we're looking forward to having a more normal volunteering schedule. And that would mean you guys with shovels putting trees in the ground. But for now, we're trying to find every opportunity we can to keep everybody engaged. And now is it a question? Yes. Okay, ready? Are we gonna take the first 3 answers for this one for black walnuts? I don't know, I won't make the rules, but if you want to become a trained TreeFolks volunteer, what TreeFolks course would you take? Dun, 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 dun. That's the music, like show music. Let's see. Okay, Ryan, Urban Forest Stewards. Ryan, Carol, Catherine, yay!
It's Urban Forest Stewards.
Nice.
So just a caveat here that I was going to immediately disqualify Catherine Biesner from this question because even if she got it wrong, she's still getting a whole bunch of trees from TreeFolks in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, one more walnut. And I mention that because that is one of the cool things that urban forest stewards do, is that they learn all about trees, but then they apply that knowledge to service learning projects. And Catherine and I have been talking about a big tree planting project that she's taken on in her own community. So it's really a cool opportunity to learn and give back. And y'all know you can't be in a room, I say this all the time, you can't be in a room with Collin without learning something about trees. It's impossible. So
It's real life.
yeah, it is.
Well, I think with that, thank you very much, everyone. And we can definitely take some questions.
Yes, and we actually have a few questions in the queue already to kick it off.
All right.
So one question is, are changing weather patterns influencing the types of trees you plant? I think a lot of folks are noticing all the down trees with the brittle branches and snowfall this last week.
So I can take this one. The snow event that we had recently was actually completely strange for Austin. There's no reason to expect that kind of weather in the next 15 years, really. Those kind of happen cyclically every 10 to 15 years, but it's very out of zone for us and not typical. But when it comes to climate change and warming temperatures, we are actually very concerned. There's been a climate susceptibility study done on our trees recently, and quite a few of our native trees we don't think will really make it in our worst case scenarios for climate change here. And to combat this, not really tree folks, but tree people in general are kind of bringing some trees up from farther south and studying how those do here, and then tree folks distributes them once to figure out that they're not actually like invasive or anything. A few of those would be the Mexican sycamore. These are from, I believe, the Pacific coast of Mexico. And then there's the Monterey white oak, which is from the Monterey area. Arroyo sweetwood, which is another Chihuahuan desert tree. And a few like that. Montezuma cypress being another one. So these are all extremely heat tolerant and very, very drought tolerant. So what we're expecting for the future would be more heat, more drought, and yeah. And then the trees that are at risk generally would be things like some of our oaks, walnuts, more broadleaf things. Generally speaking, stuff like beans, drought tolerant, spiny stuff, that's not going to be at risk at all.
And now ash, because of the emerald ash borer disease, we're not really giving those out as neighborhood trees.
Yeah. So emerald ash borer is now in Texas. We are fully expecting it to be in Central Texas very, very soon. This is the tree that has taken out most of the ash trees north of us. We don't have as many ash trees as like the Midwest here, but a lot of our riparian forests are very like, heavily ash. So.
And on the same conversation of risk, we have a question from Blake. How can we start managing wildfire risk?
So that's another really great question. Wildfire risk here is not as extreme as in places like California. But there is a fair amount of risk here. Generally speaking, there's some really good wildfire guidelines that have been put out by the counties and city about how to create a buffer zone around dwellings and structures. But honestly, our trees don't burn very easily. Things like the lost pines, that's a more fire adapted area that is more prone to fires. And so we don't really expect to see a Bastrop type wildfire disaster in Central Texas, in the Austin area of Central Texas.
Another mitigation for wildfire is to reduce some of the fodder that tends to build up. So these fires would roll around here and not necessarily catch the canopy on fire, but because we suppressed a lot of these wildfires, the pine needles, the brush, the bushes, they kind of started piling up. And for decades. And so it just created that much more fodder for the fire to burn. So some practices that the Texas Forest Service and Bastrop County are doing is doing some prescribed burns, making sure that the pine needles are not on top of roofs, you know, putting a 30-foot perimeter between the forest and a house. Things of that sort can be done to still maybe have a fire, but not have it be so destructive.
And it's much more effective than raking.
I just wonder, because I know when I've burned juniper before over at my folks' place in Lago Vista, that's like almost an incendiary type of experience. And I guess I just see a whole lot of the juniper in
You
flames,
will see a lot of juniper. They make up like 80% of the trees in Central Texas.
Yeah.
And they used to be controlled by, cattle coming through and keeping them in check, wildfires rolling through, keeping them in check. But now really nothing's keeping them in check. So they do tend to, they don't suck up the water like it's believed. They actually keep it from hitting the ground in the first place because there's just such dense foliage to them and they're evergreen. So anytime it rains, it needs to rain a whole lot before that water actually hits the ground. And so that's some of the issues come with just the water not being available in the soil. And there's just a lot more of them than we used to have.
Also makes cedar breaks a less flammable habitat because with that water not hitting the ground, you don't really have the forb and grass growth in the understory. And that's generally where you have your fuel loading that burns enough to create a crown fire.
I think he nailed it again, Andrew. Thanks, Collin.
I saw a question come up that said, is TreeFolks in other Texas cities? And the answer is currently, we are Central Texas, so Austin is our base, and we're working through counties around us, but there are other tree nonprofits in the Dallas area, in the Houston area, and San Antonio has a really good program with the city, similar to Neighborwoods of what we do, but it's like one day out of the whole year and they give out like 10,000 trees. So there are other, I guess, sort of operations that are happening throughout Texas, but we are definitely, I would say, hyper-focused on the Central Texas region.
Yeah, I will add that there are sister cities all across the state, and we are potentially, expanding. Obviously, we've done Bastrop and Hays County. San Marcos wants to do similar programs like Neighborwoods, but we are getting calls for consultations about the carbon program from Cincinnati, Ohio, Amsterdam. I mean, all over the world, they're calling us about this new carbon program that we're doing. And so it's getting attention outside of here. So that's exciting.
I saw another question earlier on from two different people about where we get our saplings and where we get our trees. And currently we work with a neighboring nurseries, y'all. Tuesday, it's almost 7 o'clock. Nurseries throughout Texas that can grow native and adapted trees that a lot of times, and Collin can tell you about the seed collection program, but we'll collect seeds that these trees are very hyper localized and they will grow those for us and then we get them the next season. So I don't know, Collin, you want to expand on that? Or
yeah, so one of the big pitfalls to reforestation is that your seed sources are not local. So you're actually importing genetics to an area where those genetics are not found. So you don't really know that those trees are really going to do very well there. So we actually make a really concerted effort to work with growers that collect seeds in Texas, and we actually collect a lot of seed in and around Austin to supply to our growers so that we know all of our trees are from this area. So we don't like get trees from Kentucky and plant them here or anything like that. But yeah, we make a really, really, really concerted effort to make sure that it is Texas genetics going in Texas soil.
And I can already see it in Andrew's eyes that our dream, though, is to be able to grow a lot of our own trees, right, Andrew? That's the beautiful dream of the future. Yeah, I see Catherine giving thumbs up too. Yeah, we would love to be able to have our own nursery here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we're starting to see demand, our interest at least, and in some cases demand from other of our partners like the Parks Department, Watershed Protection, who are telling us that they're struggling to find those local native species for their own reforestation projects. And as that challenge continues, it's kind of creating we're kind of recognizing a gap where that might be an area that we shift into, whether it's working with groups, like companies, corporation, corporate partners, or volunteer groups to collect seeds and then shipping them off to our nursery partners to grow them out for us, or doing our own propagation. Our own seed germination propagation at the TreeFolks, the tree ranch, as we call it. I mean, we've got a corral, so it's obviously a ranch. But yeah, so there are some opportunities in that, along those lines, and Collin is already working on a project like that to kind of test the concept.
Quite a few, actually. So we have one for live oaks. We have one that's kind of developing right now for Texas mulberry, which I'm very excited about because they're very hard to find. Yeah, so we're hopefully going to really dramatically increase the diversity that we can offer.
So we have one question from Cliff. Seems like aged oaks in the hill country are dying rapidly on a downward trend since the drought of 2011. What are good options to replace them, this caliche, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, caliche soil?
Caliche, but I mean, I think that's how you say it.
Caliche.
It is caliche, okay. So the oaks that you're seeing like on a downward trend, I would actually argue that they died in the drought. And you're just seeing them senesce now and in their lives. So this is really a process that started in 2011 and took this long to really complete. So of course, the more droughts in between didn't help. And the fact that we see more coming in the future isn't going to help either. But really, one of the best things to do in a situation where you have caliche soil is to try and do some soil management techniques. So to try and really encourage more organic content in your soil. And some great ways to do that is to plant a tree that offers that as an ecosystem service. So like a bean maybe. Stuff like huisach, mesquite, ratama. These are all fantastic trees. They're extremely drought hardy. They flower, they're beautiful. And then every single piece of foliage that they drop increases nitrogen, carbon, and just organic content in the soil. It really builds a really lovely soil that other trees can grow in.
I'll also add that having grasses in these areas is probably the #1 way you're going to get soil, and then trees will probably naturally come after that. But you have the Texas mountain laurel, which, man, it just took on this winter like nobody's business, and it can also take on super drought and heat kind of environments as well. So those legumes, like Collin is saying, will really help. But in caliche soils where there is such a lack of soil, having grasses, the natural native grasses, build that up first will really help.
And those grasses also capture water and funnel it down to tree roots, which is super important for trees. Without that grass, their roots get burnt at the surface level, their trunk gets burnt without the shade. All the understory stuff around trees is really, really important. I think there was another question about maybe expanding TreeFolks given the increased development in Austin. I might let Andrew take this one.
All right. I actually took myself off mute for a second because I wanted to acknowledge Ryan's comment about research and burn it area being the grackle crapital of Texas. I think that's awesome. I had not heard that term before, but I am using it from here on out. The grackle crapital of Austin. But in terms of,
I had to tell people, don't park your car right up in the Scheisenleine. So, because the birds, they'd come back in shaking their fist at me in my 213 an hour. I'm like, hey, hey, dude.
Yeah, I hear you. So it's almost as bad as parking under a pecan tree. You don't get the stains, you get the dents instead.
The ping, yep, exactly.
So in terms of expansion for TreeFolks, we are, we have created relationships with folks in Bastrop County, with folks in Blanco, because of our work with the wildfires and the floods, and of course throughout eastern Travis County, with what we consider to be our pre-disaster mitigation work rather than the post-disaster work. And the idea that has really arisen here is that this is not just a series of independent tracts of land with some trees on it. This is really an interconnected ecosystem that extends far beyond Austin into the into the watersheds and the lands around the city. Just consider how far the Colorado River flows, and how much impact we could have if we're working up and down the Colorado on some of the reforestation work in floodplains there. So the key for us in expanding is finding the right partners. Here in Austin, we've got strong relationships with Keep Austin Beautiful and with Austin Parks Foundation, with other nonprofits, and good relationships with our city government and county government here. So for us, it's really a matter of creating those same relationships where we can take our expertise and plug it into those other opportunities, working with, say, folks in Williamson County to replicate the Neighborhoods program to help rebuild the urban canopy, or working with folks in Bastrop County if they're possibly not in the not in the Lost Pines region, but rather in more of a floodplain region, working with them on the reforestation work. So so our plans are definitely to take what we do best, focus on that, and bring it to other areas where we can find partners that do what they do best. And shamelessly, I'll say a lot of our government partners bring money to our work. They enable us to do the work that we do in the municipalities. And not only can we do the reforestation work, but we also bring the value add of mobilizing volunteers to help do the work. We are also able to apply private resources, private investment, to augment the public investment, and we're able to do a lot of advocacy and just community interaction that government agencies are not able to do. So when we talk about the contracts and the interactions that we have with government, it is receiving some funding to do a portion of the work that we do, but the other kind of value adds, like I mentioned, the volunteers, the advocacy work, adding private dollars to public to expand the impact. That's really what we're seeking when we're seeking expansion. And it's we say the organization is called TreeFolks because it is all about trees, and it is all about folks. The first part of our mission is that we build community in Texas. And so without the people, without the folks, the trees are not, the trees don't have as much of a chance. So it's our dual mission there also, as we're looking to expand, not just about planting more space, but building more community around planting and caring for trees.
Love that.
Sorry, Juan.
No, go ahead, Beryl.
I actually just have a question for y'all. So I know we're only a couple days out from last week's winter storm, but with these government partnerships, with these community relationships that y'all have been able to form, what have conversations been like so far with regards to tree removal and reforestation following Winter Storm Uri?
Just wait. Give them a chance to respond. Don't prune anything until mid-March or later, please. Sometimes they might look really sad and all the leaves went brown and maybe some top branches are crispy, but definitely give them a chance to bounce back. If spring comes and your tree is just as brittle and there's no buds or flowers or anything, then it's maybe dead, but it might not all be dead. The roots might still be alive, right? So definitely worth the wait. Really give them a whole season to respond. But before you prune, unless it's hazardous, definitely wait. Just give them a chance, because I see a lot of brown, but it doesn't mean they're dead. It might just be shock, and they might lose all their leaves, but they might come back, right? They are more resilient than we give them credit for, and this happened in Hays County with the Blanco River. A lot of folks are just like, oh my God, my tree's done, and they cut it and it was actually still alive. So they could have just waited until the spring. So definitely just let them be for a second and just wait. A good trick to see if stems are still alive is you can scratch at the surface of it, and if you see a little green, that's a good sign. That means that it's still alive, at least that branch is, right? And so, but if it breaks or it's brown, then it's done, right? But there's a little way that you can test that and not have to take out the whole tree. But I'm sure Collin has.
I'll mention on a broader scale too. Well, it came up earlier in a conversation, and not the first time that I've heard it, that it's been interesting walking around neighborhoods and seeing some of the ornamentals, some of the invited species that have not withstood the pressure of this cold, but that some of the native, so many of the native species, while they may have dropped a limb or two, are still in pretty good shape. And so we will see, I think, we'll see very limited damage to our natives, especially the really well-established ones. So.
I just want to add, if your tree peeled like a banana in the ice storm, maybe don't wait. But generally speaking, stuff like oaks, they can even go like a full year without leafing out, and they're generally fine. So just wait it out.
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget that trees were here before humans, right? And like they will also continue to be here until after humans too. So who knows when that'll be? But at the same time, like we must do our best to just keep them rooted. And I definitely agree with you guys. I don't think that I had any idea about all the things that I was going to learn, and how I'm going to look at houses as a square cube of metric ton of CO2, and also a tree in comparison to walruses. Yeah, wild. I'm super grateful for you guys, and the fact that, Andrina, Margot, and Collin, you guys took a little bit of time to share with us about TreeFolk and about how we can get involved, as simple as just like posting a picture. A big special shout out to that heart, the lady over there sharing the heart. I don't think this would have been possible without Catherine at all. I think that Catherine put both of our organizations together, and very much looking forward to seeing other opportunities that we can work together. And even if it's just drinking a beer under trees, very much looking forward to that. But thanks so much for everyone for the questions, the conversations. I think that we did, Barely can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have the 3 people already, right? They got the trees.
Yes, we do. We have Chris Summers, Ryan Baggett, and Carol Cavanis.
And Carol.
Yay!
Nice. Yeah. So thank you guys for paying attention. And I think that we'll just send you guys some emails to get the addresses, and then we'll coordinate with Collin to deliver those walnuts. Yeah, of course. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to reach out, and hope to guys see you next month, for our next happy hour. Take care, continue staying safe, and have a good rest of the night.
Thanks, this is great.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Quite welcome, anytime.
Thanks, Solar Austin. Thanks, TreeFolks.